such a fantastic time with the other speakers and hanging out with your kids. You guys got awesome kids. It was fun. And I'll tell you something, I do a lot of work with schools, and typically when I go into school, I find it very stressful, because typically in North American schools that I visit anyways, there is a general lack of respect for kids, and they're turned off learning. And I have to give a rebuttal to the gender piece there too, because I think there's a big conversation happening now around gender and learning, and for a long time we thought we for a long time, I think we thought that we disenfranchised our girls and that we were leaving them behind. And I think in the emphasis around girls and education, we now are seeing that we've left some boys behind. Boys who don't want to sit in desks, who'd like to get up. Boys who would have fit the category that I was talking about today, who would like to be busy and grab that hammer and grab that saw right away and get at it, let's go, let's get her done kind of boys, who end up getting labeled as being disobedient, who end up being put on Ritalin, who end up being slapped a diagnosis of conduct disorder. And those are exactly the kids who I think actually are going to come together as we see the 40 million and all these other numbers that are going to be the revolutionaries that say there's another way to do life where I can thrive and survive. And so there was a piece of that going on for me today, and it was just fantastic. So I want to tell you a little bit about my overall experience and what I saw and what was meaningful for me. Generally speaking, I would say today was about kids being active and producing. Active and putting out. These were not kids who were being passive and consuming, which is so often the way traditional education is formulated. I know that you folks were watching that feed, and I have to say, what did you think about the soldering guns and the saws? Were you going crazy? I'm looking at the mums here. We have this most bubble-wrapped generation. Where I come from, they're taking down the playground equipment because kids might slip and fall into the dirt. So they're just flat. It's just concrete now. What's to do out on the playground at recess when it's just flat with nothing to do? You bully. We wonder why bullying's on the rise. Here are these kids with saws and soldering irons, and that scares the bejeebus out of us. But you know what? The kids love that. And it's amazing how competent they got with a little hammer and swinging, from the shoulder in just a few swings. Incredibly empowering. One of the boys leaned over and said, "Wow, I can't believe we're allowed to do this. I have a friend in 5th grade who's not allowed to use scissors yet." I didn't think about that. It is an indication of our general infantilizing of kids. It is a symptom of a world where we mostly think kids are not capable and that we do not open up opportunities to them. And yet if we do, they flourish. That it's a call for us as parents to increase what we might think our kids could do and manage to do. We've gotten, I would say, perverse in what we think kids can't do in our society. I remember hearing about the last living veteran of World War I telling his story of leaving home at 7 and walking from Italy to France. And he was a chimney sweep. He actually joined the army because that was an easier thing to do. That was, well, that's better than cleaning chimneys, right? 7 years old, leaving home at 7 years old. Most of us wouldn't let our kids cross the street at 7 years old. Unbelievable. Our kids can do a lot more if we give them the opportunity, and I saw a lot of allowing kids to do today. At the end of that actual working with the saw piece, the kids made a chair, and the one child was sitting on the chair, and she said, "Oh, it's so comfy." Did you see the hardwood that it was made of? But you know what? When you made that chair, man, that is a comfy chair, because that's my chair, right? It's a beautiful thing I saw. The other thing I saw today was noise. Noise. None of those kids got hushed. None of them got hushed. You need to have some energy and talk about things in a group when you work. It was a beautiful thing. And yet when they were called on to give instruction, there was immediate respect. Immediate respect because, and this is what I truly believe, those facilitators approached those kids in a way that those kids knew they were respected immediately. It was palpable that they were coming in an egalitarian relationship. So they gave them respect back when it was called for. You give me the freedom to be loud when I need to be. Give me the respect of being quiet when I need to give instruction. So those kids were able to turn it on and turn it off, and that's a fantastic skill. Kids need to be loud so long as they are respectful. Why I think that's important that they got this feeling from their facilitators is that of the two things we know about academics in terms of influencing our kids' performance, one is ratio of facilitators to teachers. I wish we could do better in that department around across the board everywhere. But the second factor is the child's perception that their teacher likes them. The relationship. The relationship. And so often we're in wars between teachers and students. They do not feel like they're their learning allies. When we do this style of teaching that's child-centered, led teaching, where the teacher is actually seen as a co-producer in the learning environment, those kids feel a sense of a kinship pretty quickly. And you can see them wanting to perform. And I saw that happening today. Another thing I saw was the, "Aw, it's over?" How many kids go to school? They're like, "What, is it recess? I got to get out of here," right? They want to get away from the classroom. Shouldn't it be every day that when our kids are learning and inspired, that it's so great that they don't want it to end? And I'm reminded of this by giving my niece her first board game. It was basically like a snakes and ladder. It was called Race to the Roof, but she'd never had a board game before. And so we were all playing. And so she won the game. Here she gets this game and she wins the game. She gets her game piece to the top. And I'm like, "Sarah, you won!" And Sarah starts to cry. And Sarah says, "Why do they call it winning when I'm the first person who has to stop?" I thought, isn't that true? Doesn't that say something about how we have to brainwash kids and make everything competitive? Whoever plays the longest is the winner because it should be fun. And the thing we know about fun is that when we keep things coded as fun, we put it in a different part of the brain than when we code it as work. And so long as we continue to keep education fun, we keep it in that play area, we'll want to do it forever. So isn't it Mark Twain who said, "Don't let your schooling get in the way of a good education"? Today, the kids had a good education. It didn't feel like schooling. It felt like they went out to play. You could tell. I hope it felt like play for you folks in here as well. What else have I got here? The kids were working in groups. We already talked about the idea of this collaboration in the future, but what's interesting is they were self-selecting groups. They were allowed to pick who they worked with. These kids didn't know each other before they came together today, but the minute you do something productive with another person, that is actually how we bond. That's how kids create a sense of affiliation with another human being. That is part of the attachment process. Self-selecting, seeking out, and doing a task together. And it happened immediately. The team building happened immediately in this environment. We went over and asked, "You guys, you're all working together here. Who's in charge here?" And there were 3 boys said, "No one's in charge." And then they all stopped and said, "No, actually, we're all in charge." Isn't that beautiful? I think that's beautiful. Well, there wasn't a takeover Tommy, there wasn't a little dictator. They really understood collaboration because of the environment that they were in. That stood out to me. No one's in charge. No, we're all in charge. One class, they asked for a volunteer. There was a hesitation. Nobody wanted to volunteer. That's very common. I teach parenting. A lot of parents don't want to get up and do the first, "Ooh, that could be a role play. I might embarrass myself." It's got to really wait a little while before you stick your neck out and potentially risk looking foolish. But then they said, "Well, we need someone to work with the tortillas and the pancakes." What? Tortillas and pancakes? What the heck can that be about, right? Suddenly it's a safe environment. Tortillas and pancakes, well, I'll sign up for that. We've suddenly lowered the risk. We've lowered the fear factor. And we can do that purposely for our kids because our kids are very mistake phobic. And I want to speak to you about that as a very important concept in education, in raising our kids, and the future of what we need to change in the way that we present academic experiences for our kids.